So hello, everyone. My name is Tiffany Liu, and I'm the National EmAGN President, National Council Director at the Institute of Architects and Associate Architect at Architecture and. Today, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the many Indigenous countries that we are meeting from today. I'm currently working on country looked after by the Gadi people of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging, and extend this respect to any First Nations people who might be present here today. So if that is you, thank you for coming and welcome. I personally cherish these Indigenous knowledge systems, and they have a lot to teach us about how we can live more sustainably. And hopefully this event could be in the spirit of their generosity in knowledge sharing. So on behalf of EmAGN and SONA, we're really excited to launch Sustainability Snacks, this series of short online events that hopefully aim to demystify sustainability in practice. Just for a little bit of background, the initiative was born out of EmAGN's Sustainability Action Plan, the mid-year planning day with all of the EmAGN co-chairs, so 9 committees around the country, and has been born in collaboration with SONA. So hopefully together we can shift the way that we practice more responsibly as practitioners in the face of climate change. Quick intro, so I'm sure you're all here for the main act. So thank you so much to Bonnie Herring from Breathe Architecture, Director of Architecture and Sustainability. Bonnie's here to share insights in a quick 10-minute snap presentation, including headlines from their Sustainability Action Plan and a few projects illustrating how these have been enacted. Bonnie is a passionate advocate for decarbonising the built environment, and her contributions to the architectural community have been recognised by many accolades, including the 2015 GLX Study Tour Prize. So just a bit of housekeeping, promise I won't be long. There will be an opportunity for questions after the talk. Feel free to drop in your questions in the chat. And if you are online, I will be fielding the questions, but it's always nice to hear the questions from the people who asked it. So if I call your name with your question, please be prepared to unmute and to ask your question to Bonnie at the end. So that's it from me. I'll hand over to Bonnie. Over to you.
Thanks, Tiffany. I'll just get my presentation ready because we all love visual prompts, don't we? Okay, I'd like to echo the sentiment of Tiffany's acknowledgement and also acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, the custodians of the land on which am meeting you today, and recognise their ongoing connection to country and to culture. I pay my respects to their elders and to their wisdom and environmental stewardship that has sustainably managed this diverse ecology for more than 60,000 years. It's in this spirit that I will also be extending my support for The Voice. Thank you, Tiff, and EmAGN, SONA and the Institute for inviting me to speak on my favourite topic. Breathe are a purpose-driven B Corp certified carbon neutral practice. We care about humanity and the planet, and we do our best to use design as a weapon for good. We try our best to work on projects that we can be proud of. And so this discussion is about how we can set ourselves up for that. And we've spent essentially a decade pursuing building electrification to combat operational emissions, which are the lion's share of building construction emissions. But it's not time yet to stop. We're not on track to reach Australia's carbon reduction targets, with areas here in Australia having already warmed more than that 1.4 degrees. So we've no option yet but to reel in the overshoot and to harness our power as architects to lead the charge. Net zero ready buildings that reduce the industry's carbon footprint and create market demand for renewables. I'm certainly relieved to see that some states are banning gas in new buildings, but we desperately need the others to follow. Importantly, once electrified, we can ask our electricity suppliers for 100% certified green power, which actually, on top of renewables, it actually drives that the energy market to shift from coal and gas by investing in large-scale renewables like wind, hydro, and large-scale solar. At Breathe, it's about $5 a week for us to pay for that, and we've incentivized our staff to call their providers to make this meaningful contribution. It's something that individuals like all of you can do, and something that we can also urge our clients to uptake.
What was that, Sam?
Sustainable systems are a key part of our approach, as is our mantra, more with less. How can we achieve more with less? It's a question that we pose regularly in our practice, and it's given rise to a reductive material and spatial design language. Clear perhaps in this very light touch renovate to rent project for Milieu, where we've punched out planters to relieve a very radiant concrete base. More with less is also about stripping out detail and scope to favour function rather than trends, reducing cost and carbon by questioning anything inessential. In our apartment projects, we look to leave out individual laundries and second bathrooms, basement car parks and air conditioning where viable, in favour instead of big bicycle garages, communal spaces and landscapes that help knit the communities together. Here at Sky House, we were able to deliver compact footprint apartment topologies with a price point from like near on $220,000. Instead of plasterboard ceilings, for example, more with less for us can mean exposing the concrete structure for increased volume and its ability to provide thermal mass. It's about avoiding and supplementing carbon-intensive materials like cement, where we can, chrome and aluminium, and where we do use concrete, using it as finished wall and ceiling surfaces. It's also about performance for us, of course. Doing more with less is about smarter and more resilient buildings that adapt to climate-appropriate passive design strategies, demand management and efficient systems. Here, a veil of deciduous vines shade the northern glazing at the commons, reducing heat load in summer, providing cooling in the air via like evapotranspiration, and offering outlook that calms and cools us. We like to hunt for simple tactics that offer multiple benefits to target reduced energy and improved adaptive thermal comfort. Our palette and process is very much imperfect. We're definitely after progress, not perfection, something architects struggle with, and I do have to remind myself every day, but it's really clear this is what we need to do. We've cultivated a deep practice of scrutinising every scheduled material with a set of criteria based on source and impacts. We prioritise carbon neutral, ethically sourced and non-toxic materials that wear in and don't wear out, that are renewable, recyclable, biodegradable. There's lots of ticks that we need to meet with every project, with every product. And we share all this research in our evolving sustainable materials guides and our low carbon materials directories on our website. We're passionate about supporting supply chain decarbonisation. It gives us more tools as architects, a greater palette to work with. And we specify those carbon neutral materials wherever possible and push our suppliers to level up to that carbon crisis at hand. Being connected to nature is also incredibly key to our work and the experience of it. We do our best to bring life to the city by cracking open the pavement and letting nature back in. We use planted setbacks, facade and rooftop vegetation to mitigate urban heat island effect and to promote biodiversity, health and wellbeing outcomes. As the grid gradually decarbonises, and I'm sure you'll all go out and sign up to Green Power after this, we wanted to expand our focus and our project aspirations. So last year we published our Sustainability Action Plan, which is a really useful document to record our existing and aspiring processes and priorities for both our business and our projects, to share with our clients even, our pledges, and to set our benchmarks. Our SAP outlines the pressing reality of the problem, our business commitment, our design approach, which I've just sort of touched on, and creates a list of targets and action items towards key focus areas, which are fossil fuel-free, net zero ready buildings. So this is, of course, about all electric heating, hot water, and cooking. It's about promoting renewable power supply. It's about reducing refrigerant gases, maximising energy production and EVs. 4 Pillars is an interesting example of this, which was an expansion of an existing gin distillery, where we were able to electrify it and shift the whole facility to renewables. On a coffee, part of the resistance of hospitality clients, it can be just, it's how it's always been done, and there's definitely an education piece involved in this, but there's also a piece about demonstration projects. And this was a really interesting one where we were able to navigate all of those things to deliver an all-electric, induction kitchen, all powered by renewables and green power with a big solar array. Our second key goal is about reducing the electricity load and meeting energy and water and waste IEQ performance targets. Nightingale Village, for example, had thermal efficiency really high on its agenda, and ratings range from 7.8 to 9.1 stars. By prioritising a really tight envelope, considered window to wall ratio, high performance glazing, all of those kind of metrics that we understand in order to really punch out that performance outcome. Tracking whole of life carbon. This is something new to our toolkits as architects, and it is a whole process to undertake. So we've committed to that in our SAP, that we will, undertake benchmark estimation, compare and analyse those outcomes. But we also need to think about it as in terms of life cycles. ANZ is a really interesting kind of circular example of a branch rollout, a kit of parts that could occur sort of anywhere in the country, and needed to be formed of materials that were really durable, available, during COVID. It was pretty tough, that would promote circularity and reuse. So we use sort of low and even carbon positive materials that really favoured biophilic outcomes, that were organic and locally sourced. Here are some little images of those pods being made off site so that they could quite genuinely be shipped around and moved from one tenancy to another as the needs changed. Lastly, reducing upfront carbon is clearly key, as the carbon profile of the globe switches from operational to embodied carbon. This piece is really about, once you have the metrics, what can we do to improve those project outcomes? So, it's about setting Portland cement replacement targets, about prioritising long life, loose fit framed buildings, about testing for design for disassembly and circularity. Paramount House Hotel is an interesting example. It was an all-electric hotel in Surrey Hills in Sydney, and that was also targeting zero waste. Park Street Renovate to Rent is also an innovative approach to urban development, which was about repurposing ageing structures to meet modern renters' needs. Really light touch outcomes there. But the implementation and nature of our SAP will be an evolving process, and we simply couldn't wait to iron out the kinks and to unpick what each of these targets mean before committing to them. So trying and failing is really better than not, and learning from our mistakes is what will propel us and hopefully the rest of the industry forward as we share those learnings. Thanks, Tiffany, for letting me speak in everyone's ear.
That's awesome, and thanks for being on time. That was very succinct and very impressive, and great overview of Bree's approach and commitments through the Sustainability Action Plan. I think you've explained yourself so well that we're absent of any questions, so I'm happy to field some myself if you don't mind. I guess for small practices starting out, it might be hard to know where to start in terms of, you know, establishing your own sustainability action plan. Do you have any advice for sole practitioners or small firms that might have less resources in going about that?
Yeah, not everyone publishes them online, and there does seem to be a really vast array of incredibly detailed, well aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN, and like really highly calibrated documents and down to like a paragraph. So, you know, you can choose your own adventure as to what will match your resources best. I think in terms of the scale of impact is important to understand. It's not necessarily about putting it on a page, it is about the action. So putting it on a page is really helpful as your practice scales so that you can communicate that design intent across the whole practice, and record all of that research and strategy, strategic thinking. But, you know, if you are a really small practice, you can either copy and paste somebody else's SAP, see what jams with you and what doesn't, or you can really focus just on those really pithy items, you know. Sort out your own business, get your own house in order around signing up to, green power, even if you do have gas infrastructure that hasn't yet had that ability to transition. Just picking those highest carbon, demons out there first, and going from there.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. I love the idea of, you know, just copying someone else's and seeing what works for your practice culture and the way that you work. In one of your points, there was, you mentioned that tracking whole of life carbon is a new thing or something that's being developed in your toolkit. What tools are you using or are Breeze using in tracking whole of life carbon? Like, can you shed some light on that?
Yes, I can do my best. It is a whole new field, I think, for architects to try and unpack the through line. So I'll try not to get confused with the detail, as I frequently do. So Breathe have different sectors as well, which I think warrant different approaches. From a small scale project, like a single home, the way that we tackle it is first by understanding where should it be sitting, what's sort of its benchmark around carbon intensity for that kind of project, and how do we get that? We've targeted 40% when we wrote this SAP. It really probably should be 50%. We can always tweak it annually, but where is that standard home benchmark that you want to work from, and how can you reduce that 40%, 50% from there? And there are some interesting tools out there, and we're still very much in the piloting phase of all of this. We have not clocked this yet. There's so many new tools coming online. And also our fees need to be adjusted to suit for this, and not every project can manage that. So it's not fair for us to stomach it all, but it is really important that we get our systems started. So with those smaller projects, we're trialing things like Carbon Trace, which is more about a reductive process. So how can we get to that 40% as opposed to what's the full life cycle? There are definitely other tools out there. One-click LCA have rapid LCA, which I'm yet to trial, but intending on doing that really soon. But at the other spectrum, with almost completed buildings, so, past DD, where you really have all those material quantities, there's less ability to fully be instrumental in those design changes and those reductive strategies. But it is still a really important way of doing it. And so with the bigger projects, I think we need a few more design tools in the mix. We've been trialing One-Click LCA. They have a 3D carbon designer tool that you can use earlier into the stage of the project. But later, when it comes to actually doing the whole life carbon assessment, it is about the material quantities that you can extract and allocate coefficients to. It's a lot more of
Awesome.
an arduous process though at that stage.
I guess it all comes down to accountability, doesn't it? Ahmed has a question. Would you like to ask your question, Ahmed?
Hey, Bonnie. Hi, thanks. That was great. So my question is basically, do you know any of kind of like online tools of something kind of like a quick thing that we can use as a starter point, kind of like in exploration of tracing carbon? Kind of like a rough, ballpark, and then that would be used in the start of the project, and then we go on with the more detailed things.
Yeah. There are lots of things. So there's things that come down to like material decision making. Like if you're thinking about, do I want to clad it in this project or sorry, this product, or if I want to clad it in that product, obviously you choose a carbon neutral one if it existed. But, there are sort of material assembly resources out there. Like I think there's like a material pyramid one. And if I can get my little tabs out here, it might be helpful to see. There's the kaleidoscope, and then there's the materiale pyramid, things like that can help you find kind of different material comparisons. But of course, you can use things like EPIC, which has individual materials, and you can check their carbon intensity. That's quite helpful if you're comparing materials, but it's not going to give you what that means in terms of quantity or on balance with the project.
Yep.
In order to sort of start at the beginning, it would be wonderful if we had a wonderful wealth of benchmarks around what should a house be, what should a school be. And there are some really interesting reports out there that cite standard carbon intensities, like there's two that I'm thinking of. One, which is Race to Net Zero. There's been a couple of issues of that one, and that's coming out of UNSW. That's a really wonderful resource. Also, Philip Oldfield wrote a new Acumen note recently.
Oldfield.
Yeah, which was really also a wonderfully succinct I guess, document that helped just outline how all of these things knit together. But the first one, the Race to Net Zero, that uses some footprint company data, which shows you generally how, projects should measure up. Otherwise, there's heaps in Europe, LETI, London Institute, Energy Transformation Institute. They have beautiful tools. Australia is not kind of in the same area at the moment, but they're a little bit, I think thinking forward is good, and using those resources is helpful.
Thank you very much for that. That's great.
Thanks, Ahmed, and thanks, Bonnie. They all sound like really great resources. Callum, would you like to ask your question?
Thanks, Stefan. Thanks, Bonnie. My question is, comes around the phrase like that trialing and failing is more important than doing nothing, or perfection is the enemy of good. And I'm really interested in how you work through testing and trying with your clients. I'm thinking even back in the early days of, suggesting chrome or not putting plasterboard onto a apartment block. And if you've got if you're working with a standard developer, they're not receptive because that doesn't exist in the market. But trying and testing and pushing something new, how do you go about that with clients? Are you quite strategic about what you choose to test? Are they really interested in all your ideas, or do you just kind of do some things and hope they don't know, or doing things in the background and then just present them, this is the best design, and you don't have to worry about comparisons?
I'd say a bit of all of the above, to be honest. I think what's been really useful about publishing our SAP is it's all out in the open. So I'm not apologizing for not plumbing gas into your building. I will just do that. And if you were wondering about why, you've signed us up, and here's our SAP to explain why, So I think there are some things that we nervously ask for permission for, but perhaps shouldn't bother. But it's also about which fight to have. And I think having life cycle analysis and these kind of material carbon tools, it is helpful to be able to know which fights to have. And if they really need to be a fight, like ideally they're not. But But, you know, we always try to do more than we know we'll get in terms of just the fullness of time and the project duration. And there will always be new technologies coming on board that will surpass, you know, previous gains made. But, you know, we like to layer it in there. So, you know, you mentioned Chrome, for example, and obviously you'll work through your material scheduling to make sure that happens. But there's the sneaky Chrome that gets in there through all of the consultants just popping it in there. And, you know, we put a disclaimer in our building specification that it's, you know, going to be red list free. So that covers it off. And you can point to that, you know, when it comes out on site. So I think, yeah, it's case by case. Choose the most important ones first if you can. Otherwise, just build it into your toolkit so you don't have to make those grounds every time. They're just in there.
Awesome. Well, I think that's all the questions we have. So this might be a convenient time to thank you and love you and leave you. So thanks so much, Buddy, for sharing insights into Bree's approach, practice and projects. It's a real pleasure to see a leader in the field being so generous. So thank you. Our next sustainability snack will be with Brad and Curly from Nude Studio sharing their multi-civil project. So I've just dropped a link into that on the 12th of September, so feel free to join us there. But until then, hopefully we'll catch you next time. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for having me. Bye.